Mr. Stephen Davis.
Wow.
Mr. Stephen Davis, what do you think of that?
Wow, I've never heard that, Joe. I mean, this is in 1974. It's the Buckingham Nicks World Tour, the only one, and there's someplace in the South. I think it's in Birmingham, Alabama, and they're really cutting loose there. Never heard it, and don't know how you find these things, but that's just amazing. I thought, I've written a book about this woman, and I've never heard this, so. Well, it's pretty darn good.
You're pretty accurate because you said I have OCD, and only OCD people can find this kind of stuff. It's true.
It's true.
No, I got the books on OCD, Sigmund Freud, the whole thing. So
I got it. I have it too. So I'm not being, I'm not like passing any remarks or anything like that. It's people, OCD people like us who keep the world tidy.
Except for Bieber, who's ultimate OCD.
Well, I don't know if you've been to the archives, which are now they're in Norwood, Massachusetts, and it looks like the last scene in that movie. What's that movie with Harrison Ford about the
Blade Runner?
No, the one about the first one about Indiana Jones, whatever that one, and it ends with the Ark of the Covenant being wheeled into this endless government storage facility. Well, that's what the Bieber Archives looks like now. It looks like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's just this enormous warehouse with tens of thousands of cardboard boxes filled with goodies. And those are the David Bieber Archives, newly installed in his own warehouse.
We were at that Gary Summers thing, not the last one, the one before, and yeah, he told me to come on by and see it.
He got it. Seeing is still disbelieving. It's just amazing and just incredible. We're talking about David Bieber, who's a very famous Boston area promotions executive, media executive. He was with WBUR. He was with WBCN. He's just an all-around great guy.
Boston Phoenix, which you wrote for, right?
I wrote the first article on the first front page of what was then the Cambridge Phoenix in 1969, and then it became Phoenix, and then it became the Boston Phoenix, and then it became sort of the real paper. And it went out of business a couple years ago, and I don't know if you remember, Joe, but at its height, the Boston Phoenix had like 1,000 pages. Do you remember that? There were like 20 sections. There was so much advertising, it's one of the few things that has gone out of business that I actually miss. It was a great weekly paper in Boston, and I'm sorry that it folded.
It's an interesting story because it was an institution, and that's where you could find your concert reports, which you can't find today.
The restaurant reviews tell you what to eat, where to eat. Pretty good on local politics. Also told you who the crooks were, who the good guys were. They're mostly crooks, of course, but. Yeah, I miss the Phoenix. The Metro newspaper has kind of taken its place in terms of certain things that you need to know, like restaurant reviews and stuff like that. But it's just not the same. I wish someone would actually revive it or start. You'd think there'd be in a town like Boston with like 1 million students, that there would be a place for a weekly paper. So I'm waiting for, we just need some young entrepreneurial type to start that up again.
Well, you can get the Weekly Dig out there.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is.
The Weekly Dig was the competitor for the Phoenix, and Chris Farrone, he wrote for the Phoenix. Mm-hmm. He now is the editor of the Weekly Dig, and I wrote him and said, "Hey Chris, want some music reviews because I'm doing crazy political stories. If you get crazy political stories." I got one for him. Last night I taped the guy from the Wilbur Theater, Bob Blumenreich.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Came to the Medford City Hall because he's now running the Chevalier Theater for us, which has been languishing for years. Now, John F. Kennedy spoke there, Satchmo played there, Lou Rawls played there, and finally the Wilbur's coming in, Bob Blumenreich. So I videotaped the event.
Love the Wilbur.
And now it's going to come to Medford. So Wilbur and Medford, Bob Blumenreich has it. So it's interesting how the whole thing has changed. But I do want to talk about Stevie Nicks. Do you have a website?
I don't. No. I'm totally stuck in the 20th century.
A lot of authors don't have websites. I don't understand. I guess they just want to go to Amazon or wherever just to read. which, I go to Amazon and and it's amazing. You know, Rolling Stones, Old God's Not Dead, that's the title, right?
Well, Old God's Almost Dead was a book about the Rolling Stones, but the interesting thing about Amazon now is that when this Stevie Nicks book came out 2 weeks ago, there was this smear campaign on Amazon of people writing horrible reviews about, you know, about how everything in the book is wrong, about what an idiot I am, how, you know, referred to the prose style as old man storytelling. And you can go read this stuff. It was just a very concentrated negative smear campaign by someone who was really knew what they were doing. And it was quite shocking, actually. And it would have hurt the book if the book hadn't gone on the New York Times bestseller list last week at number 13, one tick behind Crooked Hillary, who was at number 12. And so we beat the trolls, Joe, but it was pretty fraught there for a while.
Well, all advertising is good advertising if you time it right.
I used to think that there was no such thing as bad publicity, but Amazon, if they find out that a product is faulty, they will stop selling it. If they get too many bad reviews saying, oh, this blender doesn't work, or the blades came out, they will take it out. And we heard rumblings that you know, if this book is that flawed, that, like these people say that it is, maybe we should stop selling it. So that's publishing today. That's the headline. It's all changed. You can be, I don't know what the word is. You can be pranked. You can be pranked out of business by people writing bad things about you on Amazon.
Wow, I did not know that. My Marty Ballin live DVD's up on Amazon, and it's like you get some really great reviews and get some people that are just, they don't get it.
The fans, you know, fan is short for fanatic, Joe, and the fans, or some fans, don't like it when someone like me writes a book about whoever they're fans with, because they think they know it all, you know. And if they get a slightly different take on it, they get furious, and now they can go online, these troll people, and say bad things about you. So what's changed, Joe, is that there is such a thing as bad publicity now, and that's being pranked or punked by, you know, fanatics. 6 people can, like, ruin your life.
Well, you're in friendly territory here because I admire your work and I appreciate your work.
Thank you.
What gave you the inspiration to work on Stevie?
Well, in 1985, I published a book about Led Zeppelin called Hammer of the Gods. It's still in print. It's been translated into like 20 languages. And about 5 years ago, I was trying to figure out what could I do that would be vaguely like Led Zeppelin. In other words, who else has fans that identify with them beyond the music itself? You know, Led Zeppelin has a myth, it has a legend, it has a cult, it has an epic. And the only name that came up was Stevie Nicks, whose fans identify with her beyond the music itself, whether you think she's a white witch or a black witch or has some sort of powers, which she obviously does. She's a national treasure, American treasure. And so I decided to, and I had a long relationship with Fleetwood Mac because I'd written a very successful book with Mick Fleetwood called My Life and Adventures with Fleetwood Mac. And I also worked with the band. I wrote the booklet notes for their greatest hits album and live, Fleetwood Mac live at the BBC. And I knew a lot of people, so I just started calling people and getting, you know, sort of dipping my toe back into the Fleetwood Mac world. A lot of people said they would talk to me anonymously because they didn't want Stevie mad at them. And I said, well, I'm not going to write a book. What's the point of writing a book that trashes Stevie Nicks? No one will buy it. And anyway, I admire her very much. And so that's where this book, Gold Dust Woman, comes from. It comes from wanting to duplicate the success of Hammer of the Gods and reaching that audience that identifies with Stevie beyond the music itself. And it worked because the book went on the New York Times bestseller list 10 days from publication. It blasted out of the gate like a thoroughbred. It usually takes at least a few weeks for a book to percolate. Well, today's a Wednesday, so we'll find out if it's going to be on the next New York Times bestseller list.
That's our station manager, Heather Mack. Daughter of one of the Liars DMZ Mono Man bands.
I see.
Anyways, she does a great job here, and that's why.
Her name is Heather?
Heather Mack.
Heather Mack. And her father was a liar?
L-I-R-E.
They were a very good band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting, the rock and roll heritage we have here. We're going to get back to your book in a second, but the reason I got this show was I have about 1,000 cassette tapes of Boston bands. Probably over 1,000. I wanted to digitize them here on the air 2.5 years ago. We didn't have the cassette, which we have now, and we had we needed a new crew, and we have a new crew. So I just got into the radio thing again, and here we are, and it's fun, because now we can do the TV, the Facebook Live, the radio, and the Facebook Live is amazing, because it will get out, and...
It's a beautiful thought.
You know, you can hold up the book, too.
I've been trying to kind of position it, you know, in front of my breasts, sort of like...
You can turn around and do it to the Facebook Live, too, right there. Your camera is there.
Where? Oh, I didn't know that. Hi, Steve. There we go. This is what it looks like.
Let's see.
It's called Gold Dust Woman.
And yes, it's working.
Yeah, it's working. And we're not selling this book, right?
No.
We're just informing.
Well, they can go to their library and wait, because I went to Burlington Library. I think 40 copies were out.
40 copies?
Well, they have networks now, and what you really want to do is have them do the book reads. Do you know about the book reads at the libraries now?
No.
So there are networks. Like I'm in the Middleman network, Middlesex, because I'm at Medford and Winchester.
Well, why? I'm in Milton, so we're in one of those networks. Yeah.
So what they do is they have book reads where they have people come together, and they have piles and piles of one book, so they get them from all the libraries. People take them out and they read them and they discuss them.
Ah.
So for you as an author, because you know they go to Baker and Taylor and buy the books, so you're getting book sales from the libraries.
I love those libraries.
And it's amazing because it's taxpayer money paying for books, and then the people actually have these clubs where they read them. So if you can get like the Stevie Nicks book into 20 or 30 of these clubs across the country, they're getting them from other library systems, and then they read them, and then they discuss them. It'll be great to tape a discussion, wouldn't it?
Yeah, unless they're throwing things at me, you know, the tomatoes and
no, we'll just send you as a cameraman. They won't even know it's you. You're doing the camera thing, and then you can introduce yourself after they've massacred the book,
right.
praised it.
Yeah, I'm a little afraid of public appearances. I don't know why. I've never been, you know, never been wanted to go on a book tour or anything like that. I think that's for the ladies who write romance novels. You know, people like me should just scurry back into their their closets and get back to work.
Yeah. See, here's a very good thing for you. There's a band called Nightshade and Jade, a Stevie Nicks tribute band.
What's it called?
Nightshade and Jade.
Nightshade and Jade.
And a very dear friend of mine, Tony Rocks, is the guitarist. Now, he was guitarist for Peter Wolf and New Kids on the Block and a bunch of people, Apollonia, on sessions.
Yeah.
So Tony lives down in the Plymouth area, and Tony's in this band, Nightshade and Jade. So I had them up in Malden TV, where I'm music director over there, and I'm music director here. I had them in Saturday. And I'm thinking, boy, Stephen Davis could sign books at the Nightshade and Jade tribute. You got all these fans of Fleetwood Mac coming in and seeing Laurie doing her Stevie Nicks, which she's
so they have a chick singer named Laurie, and she is doing Stevie Nicks songs.
Yeah, after we go off the air, I'll play some of them.
Yeah, I'd like
and you can hear it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, so if you don't like personal appearances, you just go and sign the book and get the heck out.
That's true, that's right.
Or stay in the audience, and they'll say, Stephen Davis will be here later. You can watch the crowd, and if they're friendly, you go up and sign the books.
Signing up. Nightshade and Jade. Yeah.
I mean, who knew, right? But in this week, people, I had Nightshade and Jade on Saturday and Stephen Davis with Stevie Nicks on Wednesday. It's Bluesheimer's. Danny Klein calls it Bluesheimer's when you can't. 20 years ago, I would be quicker, but you know, you understand me. But how many pages?
I think it's 312.
Which is a lot these days.
320 and 330, and crammed with adventure and incident, and to an extent that surprised even me, the biographer. I had no idea. I mean, I knew that Stevie Nicks had this epic behind her, that she had, like Led Zeppelin, she has her own myth. But I just didn't know the extent to which she sort of lived out this adventure. Just constant touring and a lot of conflict, a lot of problems with various drugs, and people tell me that the pages of this thing really turn, which is very gratifying. But you know, it's like Joe Perry from Aerosmith says. Joe, he says, "Don't bore us, get to the chorus," and the chorus is on every page of this book, which I'm kind of proud of. So it has pretty good pacing. Let's put it that way.
I got some questions for you then, since you did the the Fleetwood Mac book with Mick and Stevie.
Well,
So back in the 80s, when Tina Turner was hitting big again, Tina and Stevie were big in the lesbian community. They adored them. So in Stand Back, Stevie goes, "Do not turn away, my friend, like a willow I can bend. No man called my name, no man came." You think she was angling for that audience that she knew was out there?
In this book, I tried to make a difference between hyper femininity and same sex, and I know that Stevie lived and preferred to live back then in a feminine community, and while at the same time she had a lot of secret boyfriends that no one really knew about, or at least some of them, until this book Gold Dust Woman came out. So I never heard of Stevie Nicks preferring women in that sense, but I do know that she preferred a very, very feminine atmosphere in her homes and around her.
Yeah, and the back of the album with Stand Back has 3 women. I presume they were her backing vocalists, but it looks like the Isle of Lesbos to me.
Well, the 3 women on the back of Belladonna, is that what you're talking about?
I think so, with Stand Back.
Yeah. Those are her singers, Lori and I forget the other one's name, Sharon. And but I again, I don't think that the same-sex register never really came up in my research, and I think it would have,
Right.
because I wrote Hammer of the Gods, and people were very anxious to tell me all the good stuff. But I never, and also she just has had her relationship with men. I mean, she went out with most of the Eagles, Don Henley, Joe Walsh, you know, John David Souther. She had boyfriends who were waiters, you know, that she met. She was described by Lindsay Buckingham's girlfriend as a bubble-headed nymphomaniac. So I never heard anything about same-sex relationships with Stevie Nicks. But that doesn't mean, I mean, I'm just a biographer, you know, and she famously says that no one knows what her life has really been about. You know, she's kept it into interiority. You know, as though she's an externalized woman, but she also has this private life that's very hard to penetrate.
Mystery is always good for record sales.
And book sales. That's why people buy books. I think that's why I buy books, is to get into uncharted territory and to learn secrets, and, you know, find out what really happened. And, you know, that's the only reason, you know, I think to buy books, or other than just to get a good story told, you know.
Now, foreign language versions, will this be in different languages?
Well, most of my books have been translated into many, many languages, from Japanese to Hammer of the Gods just came out in a Bulgarian translation with material that I don't even know what it says. You can't even read the alphabet because it's Cyrillic. It's you know, it's not like our alphabet. They have different characters. And I know there's material in there that I didn't write, and so, but that's what happens when you know, sometimes you sell a book and they want to update the story. So I did a book about Guns N' Roses. It's in like 23 languages. Now, Stevie Nicks here, for some reason, we haven't gotten any foreign sales yet, and I'm very kind of surprised about that. But now that it's been on the bestseller list, the New York Times bestseller list, we may start getting some of that action from foreign publishers. Stevie Nicks is right now in Australia with the Pretenders.
Really?
And she's on tour, and there's a market. That's actually her biggest market. Also Fleetwood Mac. They can go, you know, it's summer down there, and these bands like Stevie and Tom Petty, Heartbreakers, Fleetwood Mac can spend are the winter months here, working in Australia and New Zealand in the summertime, making a lot of money. And that's what they're doing right now, as we speak.
That's amazing. I'm going to digress one more time. I worked with Randy California from the band Spirit.
Love Spirit. We used to go see them at the Psychedelic Supermarket on Commonwealth Avenue. Remember that place? It was in a basement.
My sister would go. It was before my time. I'm only 63, so.
Oh, a baby.
I'm not an old god, almost.
You're not even a baby boomer.
But,
Well,
so,
you were.
Randy did a remake of Nature's Way with Sarah Fleetwood. So it was fun. I'd get these phone calls
Nick's
from Sarah.
wife, yeah.
Joe, I'm driving around LA, and it was just so cool. On Malibu, or wherever she was, it was just, I'd get these phone calls. And
Boy, is she beautiful. Sarah Fleetwood. Give me a break. Oh my God. And that's who Stevie's famous song is directed to. If you build your house, I'll come. That's my favorite. People say, what's your favorite Stevie Nicks song? And it's actually Fleetwood Mac's Sarah, which is like an enchantment. I mean, this is like a spell, that song. And you hear it live versions or various versions. And I wonder if your friends down in Plymouth, Nightshade and Jade, I wonder if they do Sarah.
I'm sure they do,
I'd like
because
to
they
hear
do the
that.
hits.
I'm really intrigued by that.
I'm going to send you the videos right away. So they did Nature's Way, and I coordinated it and put it out on CD Review magazine.
Mm-hmm.
I was the A&R man, so I signed Marty Ballin and Randy California,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we get this marvelous version of Nature's Way, and Harvey Warfield did the interview, so we have an interview disc, and I should send you all these links.
Well, what is Nature's Way? For some reason, I'm twigging on this one. I don't know.
Nature's Way was their FM hit, so they had I Got a Line on You on AM.
Oh.
And then this huge FM hit, It's Nature's Way of Telling.
Yeah.
From Sardonicus, 12 Dreams. So it was the hit, the FM hit off of Dr. Sardonicus.
One of the interesting things about Spirit is that Randy sued Led Zeppelin.
No, Randy passed away.
Randy died, but who sued Led Zeppelin
So
last
it was
year?
the fellow that runs the estate for them, and he's I think he's up here, Mick. His name is Mick, and yeah, they sued Zeppelin.
They sued Zeppelin for Stairway to Heaven, and claiming that the Stairway to Heaven was based on a Spirit song. And the fascinating thing was that Robert Plant and Jimmy Page flew to Los Angeles, and I think they lied on the stand, saying that they had never heard. They said things like, "Well, we never heard of Spirit," and blah blah blah. We never heard Spirit songs, which I know is a lie because I wrote a book about Led Zeppelin, and I know that contemporary interviews in 1970, 71, they're talking about all the great California bands, Big Brother, on the Holding Company, and Jefferson Airplane, and the Grateful Dead, and Spirit.
Led Zeppelin opened for Spirit.
Yeah, in
And not only
1969,
that,
right? Yeah, but they lied on it. What I'm saying is that they came and lied on the stand, and won their case. That case got thrown out based on people believing them. And I was going to write a letter or something, but I thought to myself, why get involved? I don't have a dog in this fight, So.
Well, dare I even tell you I was on a witness list. But they didn't need me because William Ruhlman, who wrote for AllMusic, and I wrote
The
for
guy in
AllMusic,
Cleveland?
I guess.
Ruhlman? Yeah, I've seen him on TV, I think.
I helped coordinate the Time Circle album on Epic
Uh-huh.
with Randy, and Ruhlman wrote the liner notes, and he says in the liner notes exactly what Randy told me, which was he gave them Taurus.
Oh.
But as we now know from the trial, it was also the descending line in Crimea River. And it was also the same descending line from like 1900, so it was kind of a public domain thing to begin with.
I see.
So that's from the trial.
Okay.
But Rollins said exactly what Randy told me, which was I gave it to him. They were sitting in the front row watching us when they opened for us.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't want anyone to be upset with me, but
Exactly.
they were aware of who I was, and I was on a witness list if they needed me for the appeal, and thankfully I didn't have to get involved.
Yeah.
Because here we are.
Here we are.
But it's fascinating stuff. But Stevie...
Spirit was an incredible band live. And I never understood the relationship between Randy California and Ed Cassidy, the drummer. Were they...
Well, stepfather.
So the drummer was Randy's stepfather?
That's right.
What a great band.
I think Bernice Pearl is his mother. I've spoken to her back in the day, of course. Harvey Warfield is how I got involved with Spirit, because he would interview Randy, and then we became friends and did 2 shows in Boston with them. So, amazing band. But Sarah, I'll give you now the secret. Phoenix. I said, so Randy, I'm getting these calls from Sarah. Do you have a crush on her? No comment.
No comment.
Okay.
Oh, she's beautiful. Oh my God.
So I knew he was angling.
I'm sure she still is beautiful. I mean, that kind of beauty does not fade.
So they're all friendly. I haven't read your book yet, sorry. I tried to find it in the library. The good news for you is it's not available. It's on hold. And there's people ahead of me on hold that want to read your book.
Good.
You know, surreptitiously go to the libraries and type your name in or Stevie Nicks' book and watch where the copies are going. It's just kind of fun as an author to see that there's activity. So it was number 14. Now, did it go higher? Or?
It was number 13 on the combined list of you know, hardcover books and e-books. It was 14 on just the hardcover books, and then it fell off the list. It was only on for 1 week, but
that's huge.
Today is just, I mean, you know, the other books are, you know, about Obama, about Bush's daughters, and Leonardo da Vinci, and Hillary Clinton, and all this, and the only book on the nonfiction New York Times hardcover bestseller list that looked like it was any fun whatsoever was Gold Dust Woman. No other music books, no other nothing. You know, it was like Bill O'Reilly killing somebody or other. I mean, it's just amazing. And I got a lot of congratulations because people know how hard it is in this market to get a book on the New York Times bestseller list. It's just, I was shocked. I mean, I knew something good was going to come of this, but I didn't think it would come so fast. Anyway, since then, it's been reviewed in the Times again and has appeared on the list. So today, being Wednesday, is when you find out about what's going to be on 10 days from now. Not this weekend, but next weekend. So we're hoping to get that magic call at 5:30 saying you're back on the list. But if we don't, you know, the fact of the matter is that for the life of this book, it's always going to have that banner on it saying New York Times bestseller, which is what you want in your paperback world, you know.
Well, you're on visual radio, so it should go to back. And at 5 o'clock, we have plenty of time. We'll help you push it back to the top.
I appreciate it.
You've been there before, Aerosmith.
This was my 6th New York Times bestseller, thank God.
Amazing.
The first one being that Led Zeppelin book called Hammer of the Gods, and then Fleetwood, and then then there was one called Walk This Way about Aerosmith that was on, and another one was called Watch You Bleed about Guns N' Roses, and then I happened to be the ghostwriter of Michael Jackson's memoirs, which were called Moonwalk, and that was the #1 New York Times bestseller back in 1988. And I think I'm missing one somewhere, but there are 6 of them.
Bob Marley was a big book.
Huge in foreign markets. Not a big bestseller here, but everywhere else did very well.
Now this is an interesting question because I didn't know they did a combined list of the ebooks. It makes sense, of course.
There's 2 lists in the front of on the New York Times Book Review: a combined list and then just the bookstores.
So how would they differentiate if a Bob Marley book came out today and he's big in other markets and you get any ebooks? How do they know that it's American ebooks as opposed to English or South America?
I think it's just barcodes. You know, I mean, it's the reason that you can't fake, like you used to. There's a story in Gold Dust Woman about how when Stevie Nicks' first solo album Belladonna came out, it was number 3, and behind Journey and The Foreigner, and the guys who were running Stevie Nicks' career took her to lunch with the guy named Bill Wardlow, who was responsible for putting the Billboard Hot 100 chart together. And somehow, a week after this lunch, Stevie Nicks mysteriously got to #1 for 1 week. And Foreigner and Journey screamed bloody murder, saying, "This isn't it. We know this isn't accurate. We know we're outselling her." And they just said, "Well, sorry, it's just for a week." But you know, once you have that #1 Billboard bestseller, it's like my best-selling thing is it's on there for all time. And so, but you can't do that anymore because it's all coordinated by machines. Yeah, SoundScan, barcodes.
I remember when I think it was the Ramones were like 50 or 60 in Record World and Cashbox, and somehow they got to 40 in Billboard. And Seymour Stein, I believe, worked at Billboard before he got into the record industry. Mm-hmm. I think.
Yeah.
God bless you, Seymour. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it was pretty corrupt, but Billboard was. It worked for a long, long time. You just can't. You can't fiddle. You can't do a fiddle with the Billboard charts anymore.
Well,
that I know of.
I was working with a band that came to me, and they did California Dreamin', a rap version.
Mhm.
It was a hip-hop version. It was nice. It was very good, but it got into the Billboard charts, and what it was the ex-husband of Melba Moore was in charge of them, Charles something or other, and he was buying the records in the stores that he knew would go into SoundScan for a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they come to me to clean up the mess, and I'm like, well, no one's going to believe it because they know you manipulated the charts.
Yeah.
But they, so still there are still ways to do it today, but you have to have airplay and sales to really be legitimate.
Well, in very small print under the New York Times bestseller list, it says if there's an asterisk next to the book title, it means that some bookstores received bulk orders. So people are still trying to, do fiddles on the system.
Well, the Republicans are notorious for it, and I interviewed an author who used to be a Republican author, and then he went straight, and he told me, yeah, he verified my theory, which was, in Coulter, allegedly, they'll buy up bulk copies so that they get into the charts. So it still can be done, but this is legitimate. Stevie Nicks is huge, and
we beat the trolls, Joe. We beat the Amazon trolls. It was a very, very, very gratifying thing to see this thing take off so well, despite this really vicious smear campaign, which I'd never experienced before, and still feel a little traumatized by. But now I'm used to it. Now the next time I publish one of these books, we're not going to let this happen. Let's put it this way.
So I have a good question about Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, because they had that Buckingham Nicks album out prior to Fleetwood Mac. And I had seen Fleetwood on the Boston Common for $2.50. Remember that Sunset series?
Sure.
Fleetwood Mac and Savoy Brown, with Dave Walker singing with Savoy Brown. And then you've got Buckingham Nicks doing this. So they're doing songs that eventually, like Rhiannon, came out with Fleetwood Mac. How did this whole connection happen?
Well, it happened because of a studio called Sound City. And Sound City was a fairly well-known studio in San Fernando Valley, in Van Nuys, and it was mostly famous for Neil Young having done the vocals for Harvest and some of his great records there. But it was like a dump. What they had this incredible, they had the only Neve recording console in the United States, in North America. And that's why when this music came out in 1975 on stations like WBCN and WCOZ, Boston stations, it sounded incredible because it had this new recording technology. And Buckingham Nicks, Stevie Nicks and her boyfriend, Lindsey Buckingham, were sort of the mascots of this studio. And one day, Mick Fleetwood walked in looking for production, looking for a studio, and he heard a tape of, he wanted to hear what the studio sounded like, so they played him a tape of Lindsey playing guitar on a song called Frozen Love. And Mick Fleetwood was listening to this tape, and something distracted him, and he saw a young woman, 25 or 26 years old, in the next studio with sort of dirty blonde hair and wearing a very attractive sort of peasant blouse and a cotton skirt. And he said, who's that pretty girl in there? And they said, well, her name is Stevie Nicks, and she's the girlfriend of the guy who's playing the guitar. And at this point, Fleetwood Mac went on the road, and their guitar player, whose name was Bob Welsh, that then became a big star on his own, quit the band. And so Mick Fleetwood went back to Sound City and said, I'd like to hire this guitar player. And they said, you'll have to take his girlfriend too. And he thought about it for about 10 minutes, and he said, okay, I want them both. And that's how Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham came to be in Fleetwood Mac in 1975. And my favorite story about this period is that she was working as a waitress to support them. She worked at a place called Bob's Big Boy, which was a burger chain out in California, and she worked at a sort of a Roaring Twenties themed restaurant called Clementine's in West Hollywood. And when she showed up to audition for Fleetwood Mac, she was wearing her Roaring Twenties flapper outfit, with like a doily on her head.
They must have loved it.
From her waitressing job. And so they joined Fleetwood Mac in January 1975, and The band had to pay their back rent. Their car didn't have a reverse gear. They were so broke, they sometimes went out, didn't have enough to eat. Lindsay's trick was to like bounce checks off of, you know, local places where people in the music industry worked, and by the end of 1975, they both, Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, cashed 7-figure royalty checks for Rhiannon and those songs on what they call the White Album, the first Fleetwood Mac album with that look. So from January being dead broke to December being millionaires, 1 year. What a story.
The late Jimmy Miller always said to me, Joe, you can be broke one day and wealthy the next in the record industry.
In the music business. It's true. And so that's one story. My other favorite story involves a song called Silver Springs, which is a Stevie Nicks song.
Adore it.
And she couldn't get it on their Rumors album, which for a time, and it's still one of the largest selling.
It's absurd. It's one of the great, great songs.
She it's even worse, was that she gave the royalties to Silver Springs to her mother and said, Mom, this is going to be on this album called Rumors, and you're going to be so rich from, and then they left it off Rumors, so she had to call up her mother, who'd always instilled in her the idea of being independent and not being dependent on men, and say, Mom, you know, I'm sorry to tell you this, but they took Silver Springs off the record. So, which was humiliating for her. But this was the spark that caused her to go out and have a solo career, that she couldn't even get her songs on the Fleetwood Mac albums. She was a very prolific songwriter, but there were only going to be 4 Stevie Nicks songs on any Fleetwood Mac album because Christine McVie and Lindsey Buckingham were also songwriters. So, in 1980, Stevie Nicks signs a solo deal. And the problem was, Joe, that she didn't have a band, she didn't have a producer, and she didn't have a hit single. And within 1 year, she had stolen the Heartbreakers from Tom Petty, she'd stolen his producer, Jimmy Iovine, and she'd stolen his next single, which was Stop Dragging My Heart Around. Feminine wiles, you know.
He was singing on it, wasn't he?
Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she didn't steal it.
No, when I say steal, here's the thing. Stevie Nicks is 32 years old. Who's going to say no to her? No one, you know. She co-opted Tom Petty. She got his band to play on her record. She got his producer, because Lindsey Buckingham wasn't going to work on her solo songs. He hated her for dubbing him. And then she got the Stop Dragging My Heart Around was supposed to be Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers' next single, and it wound up on Stevie Nicks' solo album, Belladonna. And to me, this is like the crux of this whole book. It's about how this incredibly ambitious young woman got what she wanted, and just by, you know, the force of her personality and being sweet to people, and at the same time having this steely determination to get what she wanted, to be a rock star on her own. She didn't need Fleetwood Mac anymore. She was, by this time, she was a bigger star than anyone in Fleetwood Mac. And this was a group who referred to her as their chick singer, and who wouldn't let her do interviews, you know, by herself. And she just went out and if you think about poor Lindsey Buckingham, who got dumped by Stevie Nicks, had to spend the rest of his career working on her Fleetwood Mac songs and making her look good and producing her songs for Fleetwood Mac. So, you know, if there's lingering bitterness, which I know there is, then there's
even to this day.
I think to this day, although, Joe, Stevie Nicks, I understand, has signed up to go back on the road with Fleetwood Mac in 2018/2019. So, you know, and Mick says it's not, you know, you're not going to see any posters that say farewell tour. So, you know, these people are, you know, I mean, Stevie Nicks is going to be 70 years old in May. Mick is, what, she's also going to be 70. Christine McVie's got to be 75, you know. McVie.
Chicken Shack.
Yeah, Chicken Shack. Christine Perfect, right?
Yeah. The great Christine Perfect album on Sire.
So, right, Seymour Stein, right? So, you know, the fact of the matter is that I was talking to some kids on Martha's Vineyard the other day, we were talking about Stevie Nicks, and they say, oh, I can't, you know, Fleetwood Mac's coming back to Providence. We're all going to go and see. You know, I mean, these are kids in their early 20s, and they're still into it. So these are pretty timeless songs.
Oh, they're brilliant. Now, Silver Springs is on the flip of one of the singles.
It was on the flip of Go Your Own Way, I believe. I think it was the flip of the first single they put out.
So Mom made a lot of mechanical royalties.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe she did do all right. Stevie's, I know Stevie's still very bitter that this long version got left off of Rumors, because it would have made her mother a millionaire.
And Rumors would have benefited from it. They should have put it. It's such a great song.
Yeah, it was too long. That's the thing. On a vinyl record, it could not fit. I mean, the original Silver Springs was like 11 minutes, and then they were desperately tried to get it down to 6 minutes, and then to 4 minutes, and she wouldn't let the 4-minute version, because Silver Springs is actually also a spell. You'll never get away from the sound of the woman that haunts you.
Oh yeah, she's great.
She's telling Lindsay that she's going to be a bigger star than he is, and that for the rest of his life, he'll regret how mean he was to her and made her leave him. It's very in-your-face.
Personal.
Yeah, personal.
I didn't realize that.
You'll
Okay.
never get away from the sound of the woman that loves you. It's a haunting song, and he hated that song. That's another reason it didn't get on the record. He thought it was like a spell on him, like it was a witchy thing.
Now, did the 11-minute version come out on the box or anything?
Then, years later, Stevie Nicks wanted Silver Springs to be on her solo album's greatest hits collection, which was called Enchanted or something like that, like 30 of her greatest songs, and Nick wouldn't give it to her. He said, no, it's a Fleetwood Mac song, and we want to put it out on our 25th anniversary. So this is a saga that has gone on and on. When I say that the book is 330 pages of conflict and incident and adventure and all this stuff, there's nothing ordinary ever happened to these people. It was like everything was a drama. And if this book, if anything, Gold Dust Woman, if it works, it's because there's just a lot of drama and melodrama in these tales.
Now, in 1979, they played Boston Garden, and I went with the woman singer in my band. She's still in my band, Lady Carolyn, and we're watching Fleetwood Mac. And she turns to me and says, with guest star Stevie Nicks. So Stevie would come out and sing and then leave.
Well, yeah, they would have, there'd be a little sort of a cabin. They still do it on her tours, just for changing, and you can, people are like tapping out lines on mirrors, and this is 1979, so she would go back and be refreshed, and come out and sing Sarah. I mean, that's what they did.
Sarah and Gypsy in Silver Springs are probably my favorite. The opening line in Gypsy, back to the Velvet Underground.
Yeah. That's after Sarah, I guess that's got to be my favorite Fleetwood Mac song, Gypsy. And that kind of bottles the entire moment of the early '80s. When you think of Gypsy, it's 1981, 1982, and the world is a much different world than the one we live in now. Very, very much more hopeful, and the '80s were booming. We had big hair, big tits, big everything. Love the '80s.
Now I want to thank the 76 people that are on Facebook Live. Thank you very much for tuning in. We appreciate it. That'll help you get to the top of the bestseller list. How do you pick your subjects? Like, if I want to write a record review, there's like a stack of the Tommy live at the, I get this new Tommy album from The Who live at the Royal Albert Hall. And Eagle Rock is doing an amazing job putting Stones out, and I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm getting all this stuff from God Bless You, Carol Kay in New York. She was Kiss's publicist when she was 19.
I remember Carol Kay.
Not the bass player from Wrecking Crew.
No, not her. Who played on all the Beach Boys albums.
Right, Ricky Byrd's wife from Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. Okay, so Carol sends me this great stuff, and we play it in Boston Free Radio. And but I have to be inspired to like write about either the Who or the Stones. So how do you pick your subjects?
Well, I can only write about something that I love. You can't spend. I started this book in 2012, and I had some family issues that made me sort of had to put it aside for almost 2 years, and then I picked it up again. But I sometimes I do ghostwriting also. you know, I've worked with Michael Jackson and Levon Helm and, you know, a lot of famous musicians, but I have to love their music in order to get into it. As I say, took almost 5 years, and you can't, it's got to be, you've got to be in love with your, not that I'm in love with Stevie Nicks, but I'm certainly in love with her legend, with her
right.
epic. Same with the Rolling Stones, same with Aerosmith.
Well,
we all grew up with Michael Jackson.
Now, what did you do to ghostwrite? Did you go to Neverland, or how did you do that?
Well, this was before Neverland. He was living in his mother's house in Encino. So Thriller came out in '82, and I got the call in maybe '86. The editor was Jacqueline Onassis, the former Jackie Kennedy.
Wow, you worked with Jackie.
Yep, she was the editor of that book, and they had fired 2 writers. And they said, I had done a very successful book about Bob Marley for Doubleday, which was her firm, and they needed someone that they thought could work with a black artist. And they said, well, if this guy could work with Bob Marley, he could probably work with anybody. So I went out to LA, and I had a meeting with Michael, and we got along pretty good. And I got hired to write this book called Moonwalk, and it came out in 1988. It was, I just taped him, and we kind of gaffed up the tapes a little bit and added some stuff. And that made its debut on the #1 of the New York Times hardcover nonfiction bestseller list, my only #1. My name wasn't on it. It is now, actually, but it's not.
Because I'm sure I have an original copy, and I didn't realize you wrote it.
Right. Well, it was supposed to be a ghost, and it remained a ghost for many years. But after he died, they put my name on it. I don't know why, actually. I mean, it's not. You have to kind of look for the name, but it's, you know, they added a chapter explaining how the book came to be, and that's where I got credited. So, but to answer your question, you have to. It's very important to love what you're writing about. You know?
Aerosmith.
Well, we all grew up with Aerosmith in Boston, and these guys were sober. I was contacted by their manager, Tim Collins, and, you know, I went around. I was embedded with them. I went around the world with them, private jets and luxury hotels, and you get to Tokyo, and instead of them asking, you know, where are the girls, where are the drugs, where's the booze, they would say, where's the meeting? And what that meant was they were looking for the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and we'd end up in church basements in Roppongi, in Frankfurt, in Germany, and so around the world twice with Aerosmith, stone cold sober. And we had a gas. It was fun, and there was a book hit the New York Times bestseller list, and I don't think I've ever had so much fun, because I mean they were just such funny guys. Steven Tyler is hilarious, and Joe Perry is very wise and knowing, and they were sober. It was extraordinary, and they had been called the Toxic Twins. I mean, we in Boston knew how crazy these guys were, and so, you know, I loved Aerosmith, and like, same with the Doors, same with Jim Morrison, which we have here.
That's an autographed copy from Stephen Davis. Did you know that? An autographed copy from years ago.
So Jim Morrison, and I went to see the Doors in a now demolished theater on Massachusetts Avenue in Boston. It was called the Back Bay Theater.
It's gone, huh?
It's gone. And not the Fenway Theater, which is now the Berkeley Performance Center.
And not that arena that's behind Jordan Hall. They played there too.
The Doors played there too. Yeah, that was the Boston Arena. It was a hockey venue. Now it's Northeastern. No, but this was the Back Bay Theater. It was on the same side of Mass Avenue as Symphony Hall, right down the street. And the Doors came out. This is in the spring of 1968, and Jim Morrison comes out in a hat and a pea coat, and he starts screaming and singing Backdoor Man, and I said to myself, this is the energy I want to be around every day for the rest of my life. And so that's where this Doors book comes from, many, many years later. And so that's really my answer to your very interesting question, is how do you choose a subject? And the answer is you have to really be in love with it, or the book isn't going to do very good. Like there's a book out about Lou Reed, for instance, that you mentioned I was quoted in somewhere, and I'm thinking to myself, God, what a depressing thing to spend a couple of years of your life listening to Lou Reed. Now I know he has some great fans of the Velvet Underground.
Hello.
You know, but I think to myself, how can that guy have spent so much time with, you know, thinking about Lou Reed, who was a very unpleasant guy who hated the press, hated reporters, and probably justifiably so. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with hating the press, but he was just not an easy guy to hang around with.
Can you hold on 1 second?
I can do whatever you want.
Great.
Thank you.
Nope.
We do something Lou called the demo that got the deal. And I assume that you might not have had a demo with Andy to get with MGM. How did the MGM deal come about?
Simple. I forget who. Somebody knew somebody, and they talked to Tom Wilson, and no one knew it's from Adam, but Andy Warhol. They said, great. They would have taken him with whoever.
So you didn't have to cut a demo per se?
No, we never cut a demo in our lives. I'm sure you probably have a copy of it.
You got that right.
So we got to run now.
And Lou, thanks so much, man.
My pleasure. It's nice to finally talk to you.
Same here.
You know, I have gotten those emails you sent.
Cool. And I wish you a lot of success with Ecstasy.
Thanks.
And
So that was my interview with Lou. That was only a little part. We do the demo that got the deal.
Uh-huh.
But I like that you laughed at that line. If there was a demo, you'd have a copy.
Yeah.
He knew I was a mad collector, so yeah,
Uh-huh.
I am the crazy Lou Reed fan that you just discussed.
I see, okay.
But our voices were sped up. I don't know why. So I was supposed to interview Lou Reed. I go to his office with my camera and everything, and there's a sign on the door, Joe, come back tomorrow. I felt like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
And I wrote, Lou, I'm back in Boston tomorrow. So we had to do a phoner at a TV station,
Uh-huh.
and he's 4 hours late
Yeah.
because he had all sorts of interviews. And then they were shutting the station down, then Lou calls, they opened the station up, and we got the interview, but
What was Ecstasy?
Ecstasy was one of his albums.
I see.
It's a good album.
Uh-huh.
Thankfully, it wasn't the Blue Mask or one of those that were dreadful.
Berlin.
I love Berlin. No, I love Berlin.
I called Berlin, when I was working at Rolling Stone in my youth, I called Berlin like the worst record that had ever,
Oh, it's an amazing record.
And a lot of people were really mad at me, and there were a couple of people stopped talking to me, like the New York crowd who was very invested in Lou Reed, just said, oh man, you go back to Boston, you're a horrible person.
Now see, Berlin and Andy Pratt's second album and Janis Joplin Cosmic Blues, 3 of the most depressing albums in history. It's great.
Yeah. Andy Pratt, yeah.
His second one, Avenging Andy, that's a very depressing album.
Is it?
He's a depressed person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked with Andy, he's very difficult.
I heard a funny story about him that he was involved with. I think he was hired to play keyboards when Brian Wilson went out with Smile a few years ago. And the story goes that it's backstage at Pantages Theater in LA, last show of the Smile tour, and Brian is backstage, and there's a lot of people waiting, to see him, and holding albums, hoping to get them signed. And Andy notices that one of these people who are trying to get in to see Brian Wilson is Don Henley from the Eagles. And so he goes in to the thing and he says, Brian, listen, Don Henley's outside with an album, he wants to see you. And Brian goes, oh, who's that? Don? Come on, Brian, so from the Eagles, he's, all right, send him in. That's how I'm doing Brian's voice. Not very well, but it's okay. And so Don Henley and his girlfriend come in, and Don Henley launches into this 5-minute rap about how he comes from Cass County, Texas, and he'd heard the Beach Boys, and he followed the sound of the surf, and he came to California to become a big star. And Brian, thank you so much. You've been such an inspiration. And Brian Wilson's sort of like nodding off, and he says, all right, give me the album. And Don Henley hands him the Beach Boys' greatest hits album. It's one of these big yellow gatefold albums. I think it's called Endless Summer.
It's great.
Yeah. And so, give me a Sharpie, says Brian, and he writes, what's your name again, fella? Oh, Don. So he writes to Don,